Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. How are we? Good? All right. First off, I would like to thank Vector for doing this and their entire events team and staff. So many of us that don't do events may not realize that many of the folks that put these things on are here early in the morning, setting up, getting it all ready, and making it perfect for all of us. So thank you to all of those folks, Anna and team, Linda and everyone who does this. They do a great job taking care of all of us so very well. Today we're going to talk about once upon a time to happily ever after. If we think back to when we're children, one of our first memories usually is stories being told to us, right? There are once upon a times that we learn very early on. Once upon a time brings us, when we hear that phrase, to a land of all that is possible, without restriction or limitation, the ability to dream and be transported to a place of opportunity and possibility. Eventually, we have responsibilities, and we have rules and restrictions that may limit those possibilities for all of us. We start to get commitments the farther we get into our stories with the choices we have made and the paths we take that lead us to a certain place. In order to get to our happily ever after at the end of our book, we need to be clear on what does that happily ever after look like, right? So for all of us in this space, what I'd like to start by doing is taking a look back and seeing in technology where we've come from and where we may go to find that happily ever after. Right, so when we look back at where we've come from and where we possibly can go, something important to understand is where do we sit today? So there is something called the World Quality Report. How many of you have looked at this, seen it, or read it? Anyone? If you haven't, this is a great resource for folks in the quality industry. It is a free report that is produced every 2 years. They survey companies across the world asking them, what are they doing in this space? So again, for anyone in the quality space, a great resource to tell you what is everyone else doing and what are they focused on. Some of the things we know for software testing today and the state of testing in general is that roles are significantly changing. A lot of this is due to the advancement and the need for automation. As we saw, integration happened, complexity has happened. Our technology has gotten smarter. It's more integrated with our lives. We're more dependent on it every day. What that's telling us is that it is nearly impossible for pure manual testing to do the work for all of us with the speed and the pace we need to be releasing at. So what we know is Roles are changing. More and more, the role of the folks in quality is now moving and shifting more towards those SDET roles and having that skill set in that technical space, as well as the functional skills. So needing both of those to balance the needs of organizations. You'll hear some folks today, I believe the speaker right after me is talking about continuous integration and continuous delivery. That's also something that over 60% of companies are focused on right now. The ability to operate at pace and speed is incredibly important for organizations. We also see that APIs and back-end testing is where people are focused right now, ensuring those integrations are working effectively and efficiently. What we will also see is that for the first time in this last year, end user satisfaction is the top priority and objective of quality assurance and software testing. So being that voice to the consumer and understanding what the consumer wants and needs is the key objective right now for most organizations. Low levels of automation in organizations will cause challenge because they won't be able to keep up with the pace and speed at which they need to operate. The skills required for software testing, as we saw earlier, have significantly changed. There's new pieces entering in what you need in that toolkit. So QA right now and people in the quality space will need to be continual learners, learning new skills all the time. Some of the things they're recommending for us in our organizations: increase the level of basic and smart test automation. Doing this in a phased and planful approach, so understanding what you need in the way of that. A non-siloed approach for your test environments and data provisioning, right? So ensuring that you have those integrated environments for your testing to adequately be able to mimic what is going on for the end consumer. Building quality engineers besides just SDETs. One of the things we are seeing right now with the organizations I work with the shift towards automation, some companies are transforming to the point that they're losing their functional knowledge and skills in their testers. But as we enter the next phase with artificial intelligence, to use AI in testing, you don't need to know how to program. What you do need to know how to do is to adequately maneuver like a user through those systems. It will bring back the need for that functional level of knowledge inside of your testing organizations. So holding on and keeping those skills will be very important as we enter AI into the picture now in testing. We're seeing massive increases in the budget and the spend on quality assurance and software testing. So people are spending more. 23 to 30% is what we're seeing in terms of budgets for organizations. That's overall IT spend. Overall, 23 to 30% is now what companies are saying it requires to assure that their software meets the needs of the end consumer. That's a massive increase from what it was previously. We're also saying people need to start thinking about, in your organizations, how are you going to leverage artificial intelligence in your testing solutions? How are you going to do that? And proactively having a story around that and thinking about it now. It's already here. There are a lot of tools being used and leveraged right now. I would challenge a lot of organizations that I talk to think about AI first. What can I use AI to do in that testing to take some of that off of my plate so I can focus on other things? What then does traditional automation do for me, and what should I leverage and use that for? Because it's very good at different things. And then what is remaining that I need to do manual testing for? And evaluating that proactively in your organizations to look at that as a strategy overall. So what we also know, as far as what's changing for all of us, is the pace of change we're being put upon us has accelerated dramatically. The scope is changing. Our lives are highly dependent on technology every single day. We're much, much more dependent on technology than we've ever been. Investing in smart QA and testing platforms and appropriate tools is going to be really important in organizations to help them move forward. Defining your strategy for QA analytics on an enterprise level. What AI will help you do in your testing organizations and teams is actually drive better business decisions. We layered some of that AI into an organization. They were able to look across their mobile platform, right, their multiple mobile platforms, and understand which login was most efficient, right? Which one needed to change, where their users were actually getting caught up or stuck, how to optimize the number of steps to get to cart or checkout, as just an example. There's a lot more there in the way of analytics that we'll be able to leverage and utilize. Because of the pace and how much volume of change we're experiencing, our adaptation has slowed. What we know as people is you put too much change, we have a hard time accepting all of the change that's being put on us. I want to look at what we also know about how much we will see in terms of things we don't know today that will change how we do what we do in the future. We have some big hurdles right now in technology. We don't have enough people going into technology to even fill all of the jobs that we have. We also know that people don't stay as long in their current roles. They move around much more than we used to see. So we can't depend on just knowing that we're going to have those same resources 2, 3, 4 years from now. They could be different people. So creating models and systems that allow us to put new people into those roles and planning for that is incredibly critical. We'll take a look at a video. Video stalled. All right, perfect. What we will do is we will talk about data then. So data for us right now is going to be also very important. A lot of QA teams, how many of you have a data scientist embedded in your team? Yes, there's one in the back. That more hands will go up next year. So data analytics and data scientists. We have lots of data available to us right now, and it's a race to the data. So organizations and companies that know how to mine, refine, and leverage that data are going to be miles ahead of their competitors. They have lots of intelligence and information available to them on what consumers want and how they want to consume it. So understanding from a QA perspective where your data comes from, how to make sure your data is valid, making sure you understand what that data means, and then leveraging it to make business decisions to provide recommendations and feedback will be incredibly critical. And data scientists in general is one of those fast-growing careers that we're actually seeing increase in organizations and being embedded in the quality space to help make and drive those decisions for the products and the new vision of where they're going. We talked about AI. Your new testers will look like these test bots, right? What's beautiful about this for all of us is these test bots, when we start leveraging them, free up capacity for us to be able to do higher value add tasks. It requires us to shift our skill set. I talk to a lot of folks that say, I want to leave this space in technology before I have to deal with AI, right? The reality is it's already here. It's already being leveraged in many organizations for different things, especially on the business side. Lots of business organizations are already using AI to drive decision-making, understand consumers, engage with consumers. Many of us don't even know a lot of times when we're chatting with companies online and we're asking questions, those are actually artificial intelligence bots that are engaging with you, not real people, right? Having those conversations. They'll flip you over to a person if the bot gets stuck or can't figure it out. But a lot of times we're already engaging and interacting and we don't even know it with what is a bot. There's many tools out in the market space, so what I would encourage everyone to do is start your homework. Do your research on these organizations and what they do and what they provide. There's many of them out there. Retest, a company based in Germany, funded partially by government funding over in Germany to use AI for web apps in particular. Test.ai, a company based right here in San Francisco, focusing primarily on mobile, backed and funded by Google. So Google and Apple are using those types of tools in the process right now and evaluating what that potentially could do for them. Another one based here in San Francisco, Applet Tools. So visual compares, using AI to do visual compares of changes on your sites, right? Lots of them starting to pop up in the market space, but what I encourage everyone to do is go out and look at those and see what they can do for you and what makes sense in your organization and having that story, right? Because being on the forefront of this is good, because what happens if we don't have the story on how we can leverage AI in our teams, someone will give you the story. So you should be aware and knowledgeable about how it can help. The other beautiful thing about leveraging AI to do some of this heavy lifting for us is, like I had mentioned, traditionally when we moved to automation, you needed to know how to code, right? You had to have programming skills to be able to write automation. So it was Selenium or Java or JavaScript, you name it, right? The languages can change, but you needed to know how to code. That left a lot of really smart, natural, curious testers in a place where they said, but I'm not a coder, so what do I do? They're the ones oftentimes I hear say, I don't want AI. They should want AI more than anyone in their organization. Why? To train a bot, you don't need to know how to code. You need to tell the bot where to start. You need to tell them where you want it to go. They find the path. But what you do need to know how to do is test your systems and your applications effectively. So testers who have those skills will be incredibly valuable as we move into AI. They should be embracing this wholeheartedly right now. It's a high value add for the skill sets that they have. Now, we need not fear that robots will take over our lives yet, right? If you ask some of the manufacturers who make these AI tools, they say it'll be many, many, many years, 10 to 15 years, I think it's longer, before many jobs are eliminated by AI and we don't need them anymore. But there are responsibilities we have right now as people to learn how to continue to be relevant as we use more and more AI and intelligence in what we're doing, right? So I say it's our opportunity to become better humans, right? How do we become better humans? One of the things we do that the bots and other things can't do is empathy and cultural sensitivity. So anyone who engages in the strategy around product development using something called design thinking, anyone use that or seen that? It's a common tool used at Apple for product design. It's called design thinking. Design thinking starts first with empathy. Empathy means understand what that end consumer, like we just saw, actually wants and needs. What actually helps them make their lives easier and better? What makes it faster and better to use? So being a smart tester and taking that end consumer perspective starts with empathy, understanding that. Cultural sensitivity. I work with some folks at Microsoft. They do experiments every year. They come up with ideas in their quality teams about things they want to try to see how it works. One of their experiments was leaving their office here in the US and going to one of the offices in Africa. They wanted to just see what it was like to work from the Microsoft office in Africa as an experiment to see what they learned. Those individuals set off. They're in Africa. They have their laptops and their cell phones. They're used to living here where they have power all the time. They didn't charge all those devices. When they get to Africa and they're there for a few hours, there were rolling blackouts. Now, rolling blackouts don't necessarily last 10, 15 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. These lasted over a day that they were without power. What they learned by doing that is putting themselves in the shoes of someone else and having sensitivity to the fact that they have to design products that will work not only in places where you are readily accessible to power sources, but in places where you could have rolling blackouts for up to 2 days and need access to those devices. So putting that into place is really important. Contextualized intelligence, making sure we're making good decisions with the information the AI is providing us. AI is already being used here in the United States for sentencing recommendations, right? For judges. So imagine a judge who sits on a court can maybe hear a couple hundred, maybe 1,000 cases in their lifetime. AI spans 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 cases, reads the files, determines patterns, right? Creates sentencing guidelines based on patterns that it sees. It then provides a recommendation to the judges on what to do. What they've seen, though, is those guidelines and those patterns may inherently have bias built in. We've all heard this, bias in AI. It may have inherent bias. The AI isn't biased. What's biased is how we've operated in the past. It's data points, right, that it's taking in that have that bias already built in based on decisions we've all made. So contextualized intelligence says when I get that data and it recommends something that doesn't make sense, which it has been doing. The example was a 17-year-old girl who stole a bike to get to her young daughter. She had a 1-year-old. And someone had taken her child to another area in the neighborhood. She stole the bike to get to her child. She's a 17-year-old single mom, African American, poor, lives in a bad neighborhood. The AI recommended jail time. She returned the bike, by the way, right, after she got her daughter. Recommended jail time based on patterns, right? Likeliness to reoffend, because she's young, right? So if you offend young, the likelihood to reoffend is higher, was the pattern it learned. People of certain racial profiles are more likely to reoffend. People that do certain types of things are more likely to reoffend, right? So using that contextualized intelligence tells us that we have to say, but that doesn't make sense, right? And here's why. We have to continue to be creative and collaborative and be able to solve problems. One of the challenges we have right now is you have the first generation graduating from college that's been fully immersed in technology their entire lives. They've had readily access to technology. They are able to Google just about anything they want in life. Guess what happens when you can Google everything? You don't have to think about what should I maybe do or what would the answer be. We stop using some of that problem solving and that creativity. So for us to move forward, we have to continue to do that. And then the last piece of our responsibility and what we do better than AI ever will is tell the story of the impact. What is the impact? And learning how to tell those stories effectively to get people to make decisions that are impactful to our consumers, our businesses, and driving us forward. So what I want to do is illustrate that by telling you the story of where testing came from and where I see it going in some illustrations. These animations and cartoons were made by a gentleman named Floyd Norman. So that name may not sound familiar to you right now, but if you look him up, he was the first African-American animator for Disney ever. He did movies like 101 Dalmatians, Sleeping Beauty, Sword in the Stone, ones that we're all familiar with, right? So he built these animations. When Floyd started his career, not dissimilar to some of us maybe, he started out manually drawing, hand drawing, all of his animations. As he progressed through his career, technology changed what he had to do. Floyd had to evolve and use new tools and technologies. By the time he exited his career, a lot of that was automated. He was using computer software and technology to do his job now. He had to be a continual learner to keep pace and stay up with what was going on in his field, not dissimilar to what all of us are facing right now in quality in our worlds. So, I'll tell you this first story, and this goes back to the beginning pieces of testing and where we've come from. Once upon a time, there was a group of knights. These knights were some of the bravest and smartest knights in all the realms. One day, they were summoned to a nearby kingdom. The kingdom's princess was in a terrible state. Her armor was not working correctly. How could she help and protect her kingdom without her armor? The knights rushed over to the kingdom and met with the princess to see how they could help. Upon arrival, they just started poking and prodding at the armor, trying to figure out what was wrong with it. So they would just randomly poke at it and see if anything happened. As they poked at the armor, several bugs flew out, which was not unnormal at the time, that there may be some bugs in armor. Then they couldn't figure out why the gauntlet wouldn't close on the suit, right? The fingers on the gauntlet wouldn't close. They refused to move. All the knights around the princess in her armor said, "We've poked and prodded, we got a few bugs out. I think we just scrap it and start over. I think it's a lost cause." Then comes in to the rescue Dame Grace. Dame Grace stood back. She'd watched what all the knights did, just trying to poke and prod. She saw how they did it and how the armor reacted when they did it. She took the gauntlet and she separated each one of the fingers, curiously looking at which one possibly was causing the issue. As she did that, a moth flew out of the gauntlet, and the gauntlet started working, magically. The moral of the story in this one is we all remember Grace Hopper, one of the original founders, right? So what we need to learn is sometimes we have to take a step back and look at things differently. Certain people, when they engage in the problem, will see it one way. But the beauty of QA and our quality folks is we have to sometimes see things in a different light. You change it up and you learn something new, right? Instead of scrapping it, is it salvageable if I actually look at it? Or should I really get rid of it, right? Taking that different perspective and look is important. Our next story moves us forward in time. So the one we just looked at was a time when no one had the role of tester. Everyone tested. Everyone did what they needed to do to see what was wrong. Now we've moved forward in history, and we're at a time that's much different than that. Once upon a time, there was a computer engineer. She was amazingly smart and curious. She was always asking questions. And because she always asked questions, her fellow computer engineers would make fun of her. They felt she asked so many questions that she couldn't be very smart because she's always asking all these questions. Because of this, and when it came time to divide out the work, they said, "You're not a very good developer. I think you'd make a better tester." So they assigned her the task of doing all the testing. She was responsible for checking and validating. She was the only tester inside a sea of developers who were doing all of the development, and she was solely tasked with doing all the testing. Since she was the only one, she was overburdened with all of the work, and she felt very isolated and alone. Till one day, she was invited to an event, and at that event, she found other people who did testing as well. She returned to her coworkers after that event, understanding that there were more people in the world that did testing, and knowing that there were people out there like her was amazing, that there were actually other software testers, that this was a profession now, right? So now testing has become a profession at this point. And what's wonderful about it, and what you will find, is it's not that people that aren't good developers become testers. What it is it's people who look at problems differently, who have a natural curiosity, are gravitating towards helping and assisting in this task of testing our software and our hardware. So that natural curiosity is a gift that many folks in testing have. We move now to where we sit today. Once upon a time, there was a software tester who walked by a dam and she saw a leak. Being a resourceful person, she quickly stuck her finger in the dam to fix the leak that she saw. A developer walked by and asked the software tester, "What are you doing?" She explained to him that she was plugging the hole in the dam that she saw. The software developer said, "Let me run home, I've got a patch kit. We'll patch it up." The developer ran home, returned, and they patched up the wall. The next day they returned, more holes in the wall. Same process, tester saw the holes, ran back, told the developer went and got the patch kit, fixed the holes. This kept happening on and on and on, repeatedly. What then they said is, we're going to the city council as a team. Instead of patching these holes, why don't we fix the design as a team? We're all responsible for a better design. Maybe what we actually need to do instead of patching these holes is rebuild the dam if it's this broken, right? Everyone understand our technical debt we all live with, right? Technical debt in our organizations. The city council said, perfect, rebuild it just as it is. They said, why would we do that? There's new tools available. There's better ways to do it and better designs. Why wouldn't we use all of those instead of reverting back to what we used years ago that isn't current? We should use current tools. And they worked together to define and design the better way to build the dam. So the new dam that they built was much stronger and much better and used modern tools. Now where we sit is we all need to work together to ensure quality. So as a team, we have to work together. It's everyone's responsibility. It's not just one person who will assure this. It's the entire team being responsible. We sometimes, though, have the gift in testing of seeing other things people take for granted. And we have that opportunity now to be the voice of our customers in our organizations and help people understand a better way to do things for those folks in our teams. So I've told you guys a couple stories, and now I want your help with something. So in a minute, I'm going to ask you to help me with a task. And I'll tell you actually why we do it later, but there is an actual business benefit to what I'm going to have you guys do in a moment here. I know, are you all terrified? You have to get involved. You didn't just get to come and watch. All right, so here's what we're going to do, if you will assist me, is in a second I'm going to ask that you stand up if you're comfortable. And I want you to talk to a person next to you or near you. The question I want you to pose to each other is if you could do or be anything, you would, right? So if you could do or be anything, I would. If you're not comfortable standing up and talking to someone else, you have to talk to yourself. That's the rule, okay? So either talk to someone else or you have to talk to yourselves. Everyone understand so far? Is that a little too vague? No? You're okay? I'm going to give you a few more clues. Because what we do know in software or in hardware, sometimes we get vague direction on what to do, right? So I'll give you a couple more specifics. In this task, you have $1 million in the bank. So you know that you have $1 million in the bank. This is good, right? Yep, we have $1 million. That's a good requirement. The next one, because we can't have them all be good, is you only have 1 year to live. Yeah, I know, I had to throw a tricky one in there. You only get 1 year. But you have $1 million. And the next one's pretty good too. You're completely healthy. So you have no physical or mental impediments. You're completely healthy for this year with your $1 million. Everyone understand your challenge? Yes? All right. If you will indulge me and stand up if you're comfortable, talk to someone near you and answer this question. If I could do or be anything, I would, given these constraints. Ready? All right. Time to stand up. Oh, and you can find a person if you want, or you can do it by yourself, but or you could all three talk to each other. All right. If you are ready, you can come back and be seated. when you're ready. You can come back and be seated when you're ready. You're good. If you're done, we'll... All right. Thank you, everyone, for doing that with me. Now, there's actually a business benefit to why we actually did this, besides just having you do the activity. But first, how many of you are doing, when you just talk to your neighbor or yourself, the same thing you're doing right now? Oh, that many. Okay. One. How many people were doing something completely different if this was the case? Yes. Quite a few? Yes. Everyone's getting new jobs tomorrow, right? That's the good news. No, but it's good, right? So why did we actually do this? Remember I told you we write the ending to the story? You have to know what you want that ending to look like. And sometimes what we do through life is we just move through it without thinking about where we pointed purposefully, right? And where do I want to be pointed? So how far off am I from doing and being anything I want to be able to do? As Linda said, I'm very big on doing your passion. When we do things we're passionate about, and even in our current professions or careers, when we find the pieces of our jobs that we're most passionate about, and we focus on those things, we see a different level of success. So finding that passion. The other thing this actually does, though, why I had you do it, is in research what we have found is that when you connect people, so in this room, we maybe came together as a group of strangers this morning when you all showed up, selected your seat, didn't know the person you just talked to. It's like watching a movie. We're just observing and taking it in. But when you actually engage and connect like you just did, the reality is, for the rest of this day, you're more open. You'll learn more, you'll absorb more. Teams that feel more connected to one another in studies have shown to outperform other teams by up to 3 times. In software, we talk a lot about tools to make us productive, right? Using continuous integration to speed our delivery, using Agile to speed our delivery, using proofs of concept and prototyping and different techniques to speed delivery. One of the things I encourage all of you to do in your teams, besides all those wonderful tools, which are good and we need to use those, is understand how well connected are your teams in your organizations. Do they say they're highly connected? Those highly connected teams are the most productive teams and have the highest velocity, right? Up to 3 times better than other teams. We rely on relationships a lot, and that's what helps a lot of teams either succeed or fail. Knowing the right people to go to, knowing the right things that they can leverage, having the tools they need to be able to do their jobs. So what I would say for the rest of you today, one of the beautiful things about events like this is getting connected to other people in the industry who may be having similar challenges to ones you're facing in your organization. So use the rest of this day at your breaks and other times to connect with the other people in this room. They're valuable resources and tools for you to leverage. It's a beautiful thing that we can learn from other people. They may have already been there and done that and made that mistake and can help us avoid some of those same mistakes in the future. So leverage that in your organizations and your teams. Stay connected to one another. We all have a story inside of us around technology, where we want our happily ever after to be. We'll watch a quick video that shows us through the eyes of a child, because one of the things we also know is when we're children, we're most naturally ourselves. We haven't yet learned to mask who we really are. But as we get older, we're taught we shouldn't do that, or you need to do this, this is what's expected, right? We start changing that persona of who we are. But if you start to look at things through the eyes of children and you watch them engage in who they naturally are, we learn a lot. right, so what we learn is continual learning is going to be really important for all of us. Children do it all the time, but for us, we're going to need to practice continual learning. The other thing that's going to serve us well is telling our stories, right? We all have them. It's a representation of how we see the situation in terms of information we know and what we want to put forward. The facts we present in that situation that drive decisions in our organizations and our companies. Being an effective storyteller will serve us well as we move into this new generation of highly connected, high complexity in the technology that we will be using. So stories are easy, right? The elements of a story is there's always a person in our story. There's some type of obstacle we have to overcome, whether it's getting funding to be able to do the things we need to do, getting the resources we need, telling that story effectively so it resonates and lands with the people we want to take action on the things that we think need to be done. And then having a goal of where we want to be. What does good look like? What does that ending of that story look like? And what do we want it to be in the end? When you look at in a story those elements, the person, the animal, the object, whatever it is, we have to know that character, right? So the person in our story, it can be our personal story or it can be our user or our consumer. One of the things we see right now that's important in stories for organizations is personas. What are the personas of the people that are using our technology? And they're different people sometimes, right? There's different personas that actually use our technology. Many organizations are telling the story of the consumer through different personas that engage with their technology, right? So if you look at Best Buy, the retailer, they have the soccer mom persona, right? So they have the soccer mom, and how does the soccer mom want to come into Best Buy and engage with that store, right? They have the highly advanced technical person. How does that person want to engage? And it's very different potentially than their soccer mom. So understanding those personas and testing as those personas. It happens in gaming, it happens in lots of industries, but persona testing, incredibly important, and telling the story of those personas. Then understanding from that perspective, what are the obstacles that persona is actually facing? What are the things in our product that challenge them every day? What do they need differently than what we're giving them? And at the end of the day, what's their goal? What do they want out of this product that they're using? What does it do for them? What's the value it brings for them in terms of their organizations? So how do we become better storytellers? I would say, first off, it starts with, for a lot of us, sometimes putting our phone down and connecting and engaging with people. We've stopped doing a lot of that, if you think about it. They just did a study. It said, on average, we engage with our cell phones, an average user, 2,500 times a day. You're touching that phone. 2,500 times, sending text messages, checking emails, looking at it. Highly engaged cell phone users touch their cell phones over 5,000 times a day, right? So people in technology. It's crazy how connected and how addicted, actually, we are to our devices. Did you guys know there's actually addiction therapy for electronic addiction now? There is. It's a real thing, right? So just like we have therapy for people who are addicted to drugs or alcohol or other things, there's technology addiction. Yes, it's a real thing now. Isn't that crazy? And we're growing up with generations of people, keep in mind, that they've had these devices almost their entire lives. So that's even more than all of us who've had them for much less time than they will have. So encouraging that live communication so messages don't get lost and we really understand empathy and what does someone need. Incredibly important. Things we also don't do, right? We have to look at someone and shake their hand and feel what they feel, right? That empathy, putting ourselves in their shoes. What are the things that challenge them every day? When we can, meeting face-to-face. We can't always do it, but when you can, turn on Zoom or Skype or whatever and look at that other person. When you look someone in the eyes, it's a different interaction than when you just hear them. They say that 93% of communication is everything else besides the words we say. Only 7% of what someone takes away from what you say is the actual words. The rest of it is your body language, the tone, and everything else they're reading about you. So how much are you losing when you don't see tone and body language and context of what that person's doing? You lose a lot in that communication, right? Any of you who have what I call tiny humans, those are my children, they're tiny humans to me. My tiny humans, you learn how to read people, and this is an example of this. I can ask my son, who's 3, a question, and I can say, Grayson, did you just run a ping test on that network, and how did it look, right? Because I can tell he's frustrated because he can't stream Netflix on an airplane right now, right? I said, did you just run a ping test on that network? And he'll be like, no, Mommy, I didn't. And I'm like, yeah, you did, right? We all know it with children. We look at them and they may tell us no, but everything about their body and what they're saying says they absolutely did that, right? That's how we know. That's the difference. We read everything else. So when you're communicating with people, if the message isn't landing, sometimes it's something else that's giving them the impression that your body language doesn't match the words you're actually putting out in that situation. The other thing to do, and I think we all have to be responsible in doing with how fast things are changing, is engaging in events and community like this one. Getting information from other people to understand what they're doing and where they're having success and how to drive that success for our teams, right? So getting connected to other people, really critical. They're gonna help us know, did this work or did that work, and engaging in that forum. We also have access to a lot of code and technology and other things readily at our fingertips that we didn't have before. But we have to engage in that and be a part of that community and asking those questions and talking to those people. And it takes time, right? We're all busy. So we're all busy doing our day. Like I said, we're just moving through that day, not thinking about what good looks like. And sometimes we have to stop and say, do I need to reach out and engage? Would that actually help me get to my ending faster? Or doing the things I think are important faster? What I would tell all of you as we traverse all of this change is follow your path. Don't let someone tell you what types of things you like or don't like. Find the tasks, the things in your work that you love. Embrace those things, learn about those things, focus on those things. Lots of people get caught up in, I have to be an SDET, or I have to be this, right? I have to be performance or security or DevOps or whatever. Follow your path. What makes sense for where your passion is in this space? There's so much opportunity. Find your passion and follow that path uniquely to you. We have to write our own endings and be responsible for them, right? So I encourage people not to lose some of that natural curiosity and optimism that you had when you were younger, right? Believing it's possible, believing you can change it, right? It isn't set yet. You get to decide. You can change, you can adapt, right? You could say tomorrow, I want to become a data analyst because I love data and I want to be a data scientist, right? We can do that. We have the power to do that. Find that passion, write that ending. Trust your instincts. We all inherently know what works for us and what's good and what our passion is, but you got to listen and trust those instincts of what's the right thing for me to do in this situation and where do I want to go? And thinking about that more often, right? Thinking about that question, if I could do or be anything, what would I be doing? And how far off am I from doing that right now? And why am I far off? Should I be? Do I want to do something different? Do I want to write that story differently? Every dramatic change in my career came when I went and said, I want. It wasn't sitting back and waiting for it to happen. It was saying, I want to try this. I want to do this. And crafting that position. When I was at Oracle, I had an opportunity that I could go and say, I think we do this differently. I knew the two outcomes were either I'd probably have a fabulous new job or he'd fire me, right? So, but I took that risk knowing that probably the best outcome out of that situation was trusting my instincts that if I wasn't going to follow that passion, I probably wasn't in the right place anyways to start with and needing to find something different anyways. So trusting those instincts and forging that path for yourself. Change is inevitable. We're going to see tons of change, right? So as we see all of this change, and as all of us are asked to try new things and do new things and look at new technologies and tools, we're seeing a lot out there, and it can be overwhelming to look at it all, right? Where do you start with all of this? But you start with trusting your instincts, and where do I want to make an impact? Where do I think I can make an impact in what I'm doing? Then how do I follow my path, not someone else's? Don't follow it because that's what other people are doing. Follow what makes sense for you. Make it your own. Embrace who you are. What are your gifts and talents? Everyone in the world brings their own gifts and talents, and they're all different. So know what those gifts are that you have and how you can utilize them in what you want to be doing. And if we do that, you get to write that ending on how that looks. What do you want that ending of that story to be? Final lesson is you're in charge. You determine the ending. I hope that all of you connect, meet other folks over the rest of today. Think about what you want that path to be and follow that ending that you're looking for on where you're going to go as we see massive change in our industry, in technology, in hardware, in software, in all of those pieces. So I would say embrace that and follow what makes sense for you uniquely. And the final thing is, when we do that, we all live happily ever after, right? We get to the end of the story. So I thank all of you for taking this journey with me from our once upon a time to our happily ever after. And do we want to take time for questions? Okay. We have a few minutes. We have about 4 minutes if anyone had questions. What I will tell you is if you have a question, I have Floyd's book. He wrote a book called The Animated Life. There are something at Disney called Disney Legends, and Floyd is one of those. If you become a Disney legend, if you ever go to Disney's headquarters or campus, the legends have their handprints imprinted at Disney on the campus. It's really cool. So Floyd is one of those individuals, remarkable human. If you actually go to Disney, you'll still see him, even though he's retired, sitting at Disney, talking to people, and trying to change how people think about things in his profession, because he's passionate about it, right? Embracing that change. All right, any questions? I'm hoping you have questions, because I want to give you these books. We need 2 questions. Yes. Oh, back there.
Is this you?
Kind of going with the story theme. Yeah. I'm a dungeon master for Dungeons & Dragons, so storytelling is a big part of what I do in my private life. And even in the Disney theme, if what we're talking about is storytelling and in the technology space, stories are often about villains. The whole plot revolves around villains and the changes they bring into our lives. As far as technology, in your opinion, what % of your time as an individual do you spend trying to understand the villain of your existence versus what you're going to do in your own time? And is there a good split there?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And one of the things we see, a lot of times, what the villain is for a lot of us, and we may realize this even in ourselves, is fear, right? So we're afraid. Someone's afraid of something. So they're acting in a certain way out of fear, right? They're afraid their job will go away if this happens. They're afraid of change. You know, they're fearful of whatever, right? But fear is a big villain for a lot of us. So what I always say we need to do is find what is causing that pain or that fear for moving forward, and that usually tells us why we have that villain in that particular situation. So focusing on root cause of what's causing this, right? What's at the root of what's happening? And then once you know that, asking the questions and changing that perspective to see it from that side, see why they're afraid, see why they're resisting or hesitant to do something. You learn a lot from putting yourself in their shoes and that empathy of why it is the way that it is. Perfect. One more? We have time for one more. Oh, you guys have to have a question. No? It's too early? Too early for questions? Yes. Yay. Thank you. You guys are such a loud group. You're super rowdy.
So I see a problem. In one part of your talk, you talked about AI and that especially the manual testers will embrace AI even more because they will, make their lives easier. And in a different part, you said, yeah, kids now start very, very early working with technology. And just a little while after, you said, oh, but don't touch your phone too often.
Yes.
Don't interact too much with technology.
Yep.
Now, it sounds like in our future, not only will we start very young,
Yes.
but also work even more with technology because, in the end, it would be nice that we can do what everyone envisioned with $1 million, and technology is doing whatever we would need to do. But where's the happy medium? How much should I interact, and how much should I actually interact with people?
Yeah, and that's a really great question because it's a balancing act now, right? Like it used to be, for example, we were forced to interact more because we didn't have Slack and we didn't have instant message and text message and ways to get a hold of people. So we physically had to call them or go see them if we wanted to get information, right? We didn't have all these tools available. So the thing I always say is tools aren't evil. Tools are great and we need them, and I love technology more than anyone, right? It's an amazing enabler. But when you stop having that human connection, there's actually books written right now on the psychological impact of technology to the generations being raised in lack of trust, that we're not connecting with them, lack of us understanding and hearing, being active listeners, we're losing some of those skills. So what I would say is some people naturally have those skills and will embrace them. For some of us, it's harder. It's not who we are. We would prefer to just send an email or send a text or whatever. And you need to figure out for yourself how to create that balance. Like what I always say is, if I took your phone away from you, like if I confiscated all your phones and put them in a box, how long would it take you to start getting twitchy on me? Is it like 30 seconds or is it like 5 minutes, right? So gauge yourself, and you should be able to go like 30 minutes without your phone, and that means don't touch it, don't look at it, don't check an email, don't do whatever, right? And put it down and do something else and see if you can do that. Then maybe it's an hour, right? But you have to gauge that balance for yourself so that you can put it away, because the study also shows when we step away, we have a new perspective, right? When we actually clear our mind, we're not multitasking, looking at email, texting, playing, looking at Twitch in the background, watching a stream, all of that, that we actually can quiet our mind a little bit to focus and creatively problem solve and think about things. Some people do it in different ways. They run, they go out in nature, they take hikes, they do whatever. But figure out for you what gets you back to that, I can be away from it and I'm okay with it. I'm not dependent on it 100% of my day to be happy. Make sense a little bit? It's a delicate balance. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be challenging. For those of you with young children, I would also say read some of those books on how you engage and interact. If you watch young children now with their parents a lot of times, they're literally trying to pull the phone away to get their parents to look at them, to have that personal connection. So if nothing else, I hope I made you guys think a little bit this morning. Thank you for hanging in with me, and I think we're going to move on. Thanks, you guys.